Hey, welcome back. This is Talkwatch, and this time I am here to thrash contenders again, as per usual. It's such an easy sort of pinata to keep hitting, but it just keeps showing its face. What am I supposed to do? Not hit it? And with me is Yiska and Elbion. Yiska, obviously, uh, Overwatch expert, content creator. I'll go with that. And Elbion was a content creator before he realized the true meaning of life was actually surviving life, getting that cash money, and so he became an analyst and now a coach for Cloud9, arguably the best
Hurricane,
team, the,
yeah.
the best esports team in the world, even though their CS:GO team is going to trash.
Ooh. Hey, they won a major this year.
Hey, they died for Skadoodle. I respect the loyalty. I respect the loyalty. They literally died for one man.
All right,
So,
good start.
all right.
How many strikes does Cloud9 give you?
Just gives me. Oh, I didn't say anything.
You didn't say it. It was all me. It was all me. It was all me. I don't want to get anybody to lose their jobs.
Let the record state.
Yeah.
Right. So this time I wanted to talk about contenders because there's a bunch of contenders news coming out. There was also I can't believe an entire fucking meeting was recorded and leaked, but that's on them. Basically, we're not going to go over that at all, but I will say this. If you are in an esports team or if you are in one of these corporations, you gotta study illegal like drug business and stop the snitches. You gotta stop all the snitches. You gotta keep the operation tight just for once in your lives. You gotta do that.
Yeah.
Just
I guess I'm already at 2 strikes. What are you gonna do?
You know the worst thing about all of this is that I felt like just from trying to have sources in Europe, it was actually quite dry. Like people weren't talking a lot. I don't know if people were just content in the massive oppression they felt systematically, or
Well,
like it's insane in that
So
regard.
the one
Like,
thing I will say on that actually is for Europe, it's actually not like that insane, right? Just because in Europe at the moment, we are the only academy team, Hurricane. So everybody else, you go, okay, we have to requalify for our spot. If you're somebody, like Angry Titans or, maybe Samsung, and you look at the roster you have, you go, we'll requalify,
Yeah.
It's a couple extra matches we have to play, but it's not that worrying. But for somebody like if you're in NA, that's real scary, right? Because there are so many academy teams, and then suddenly the chance of you losing your spot, it's pretty real.
yeah.
So I'll just go over the changes real quick. As far as I know, all academy teams are seeded. You're going from 12 teams to 8. That's kind of random, but it makes sense if you just think about it financially rather than think about
and
it.
NA gets 2 regions. So
Yeah,
they have,
and so they're split basically. So they technically actually go from 12 to 16 in a sense, whereas everybody else goes from 12 to 8. And as far as I know, you have academy teams seeded. Everybody else has to retrial unless you. But that kind of changed into like maybe depending on the performance they're allowed to be seeded in or something weird like that. And then I assumed the cycle repeats, but maybe it won't. Maybe they'll change it 1 year from now in the upcoming season, and then you can also get relegated out. But maybe that changes also. Like I said, it's pretty unclear as to the long-term plans of all of this. So here's my contention with contenders is, as far as I know, they want to lower the requirements for second or third party land organizers or tournament organizers, right? And the reason they want to do this is because they kind of realized, wait a second, we don't actually have the money or infrastructure to actually like run contenders worldwide. You don't even have the money to run the franchise worldwide yet, right? So I'm not certain why they were thinking about it that way. But the entire point I'm getting at is like every single contenders problem that's happened in the last 2 years is actually just an after effect of their initial decision to try to control contenders to begin with. Because if you think about it, right, in the first year of Overwatch, all alternate lands were very heavily restricted. I think there was only like two, you can count them on like on the fingers of your hand how many there were. right? Outside of like Apex. And so basically Ultimate organizers like, oh shit, this is probably too hard to run, or maybe it's like, or maybe like Blizzard was fucking crazy. I'm not exactly sure how it went down, but all of them like basically got scared off of doing Blizzard events. Then they took all the best teams outside of that equation, and you still left the restrictions, and and then the teams are looking at this like, okay, wait, I can literally buy myself into Overwatch League, but if I had a Contenders team and I literally destroyed everybody 40-0, like opposite Shanghai Dragons, I still couldn't get in. Is that correct? It's like, yes, that's correct. Well, in that case, I'm not going to get into a Contenders team. And so every single problem that's subsequently happened is because you've had either bad or inexperienced teams at the bottom level. Or naive, I guess, would be another way to put it. Because like everybody gets tricked the first time. Like a bunch of these orgs gets tricked the first time when they first go into it because they don't realize the financial demands of what it actually takes to run a team, or the like requisite viewing demands of what it takes to run a team, because it's basically an ad. It's like basically a marketing tool, right? So basically what I'm saying is all the roosters came home to roost, and that's kind of how they got screwed over. It's kind of how they screwed themselves over with Contenders. So is this like a wrong view, or what do you think?
So I think technically this is almost an overarching issue that I have with Blizzard, is that they are very unwilling to give up responsibility, and if they do, the feedback I get from people that would receive that responsibility say that they don't have an assurance that they are able to build a brand off of that. So even if you take that, whatever that is, and it's not necessarily TOs, but also casting, whatever, everything of that, and you want to invest in this as a company, but you don't have an assurance that if the contract is still the same thing next year, and you don't really make money on the first contract already, well, that's immediately not attractive to, right? So back in the day, of course, we had some ESL events also. Just, in hindsight, we have to say they also pretty much invested into, getting Uber shouts up to speed. Potentially, they could have gotten Jason Kaplan. That was an ESL investment, and then they also have had these tournaments. I think a couple of trials. Is trials still run over the ESL page, by the way?
I think Broadcast GG has taken over most of the trial stuff.
Yeah, I think Broadcast GG.
Like Open Division, you mean?
Open Division, yeah.
Open Division, yeah. I'm pretty sure Broadcast GG has taken over pretty much all of the Open Divisions, and they've taken over a lot of the trial stuff, because like our trials matches were streamed on Broadcast GG stuff, yeah.
And in terms of signing up for Open?
Signing up for Open, I'm actually not sure. I've never done it myself.
Yeah.
So
yeah, okay. No, because that was also part of, I think that was something that ESL offered over their platform. If that's still the case, fine. But it felt like, at least I would imagine, that if I was ESL and I don't have any assurances about what's going to be in the future, I can't even build a brand on saying I am the talent developer of Europe. Also, your streaming numbers are really not that attractive to us. We could potentially raise something, but like, why would we fatten your scene that you're just going to take from us next year? So I'm not sure if that was actually the deal. It sounded like this from the outside, though, and in that sense, yeah, I would probably agree that this now is the echo of what happened back in the day.
By talent development, you mean like casters or players as well?
Both. I think it'll count for both.
Both? Okay. Yeah. So I don't personally have a problem with Contenders being like the main like tier 2 scene. I don't have a problem with that. Because as long as, in my opinion, if every OWL team was running an academy team, because then there'd be a much more like clear path of how you get into OWL, right? You can work your way up through tier 3, and you can get noticed to an academy team, and from there you have very clear direct promotion opportunities, right? As well as then there's more money in Contenders, right? And people can live their lives off of playing professionally outside of OWL, right? And I'm kind of okay with just the concept of there being like a very consistent league that you know where you're going to play for most of the year, right? Like the way that they're moving Contenders to being 2 seasons a year, but they're slightly longer instead of 3 seasons a year, I'm good with, because it actually it still gives you that consistent league, right? You still know, okay, hey, 5-6 months out of the year, I forget exactly what it is, I'm going to be playing Contenders, right?
Yeah.
And that's through the official Blizzard channel and everything. You know, it's still a good way to get noticed, everything. But I want to see these third-party events in the off-season for Contenders, especially, right?
Yeah.
I think it's harder for Overwatch League with their current schedule to like get people to come do third-party stuff, right? Because it's like every week, back to back to back. You know, you play 2 days a week, and then you get one off day maybe, and then you have to prep the other 4 days. So it's hard to pull them away. But for Contenders teams, why would they not? And I think obviously the argument is going to be viewing figures, right? Viewing figures are always going to be the problem when you do something with the tier 2 scene, because the tier 2 scene is always just going to have less interest from fans, because if you're maybe a super casual fan, you probably only really want to watch like the main league that has a super high production value. And if you're like a hardcore nerd on the game, you want to watch like the best parts of the game, right? And generally speaking, for strategy alone, that is the Overwatch League. But I know I'm not alone in thinking this. It's definitely something I'm biased of, because I've worked in Contenders for most of this year. But the pure like skill and the drive of all of these Contenders players is just at the same level, if not higher than a lot of Overwatch League players.
Yeah.
There are so many players in Contenders who are super skilled. You can come watch, and you can come watch people pop off, right? And realistically, for the casual fan, that's what they want to watch. They want to watch people come and pop off. They don't necessarily need to understand, you know, everything behind the compositions or, you know, the pathing and, you know, there's different strategies that the teams are using. If they can watch people pop off and, you know, get their name 6 times in the kill feed, right? That's exciting for them. And I think a large part of it to do with the low viewing figures is it hasn't at any point in time since Overwatch League has come out felt like Blizzard has put the same marketing effort into Contenders anywhere close. I mean, obviously they're not going to, right? There's no reason for them to put the same man hours into marketing Contenders as Overwatch League. It doesn't make any sense. But even just a semblance of that as some sort of fraction, or at least using the Overwatch League platforms, the Twitch, the Twitter, you know, to it's not rebroadcast, it's host on Twitch, host Contenders matches, which in the past I remember
notify people Contenders matches are actually happening.
Yeah, but they wouldn't they were not hosting Contenders matches. Instead, they were running reruns of Overwatch League at the same time. And those reruns would end up with the same, if not more, viewers than Contenders. And you know, there's a lot that could be done with the Play Overwatch Twitter account, which has a ton of followers, or the Overwatch League Twitter account, in promoting Contenders more heavily, I think. And that would not solve the viewing issues, but it would definitely boost them a little bit. And hell, you know, add the Overwatch League tokens to the Contender stream, right? Maybe people watch purely for that, but then at least, you know, Contender teams can go to their sponsors and be like, hey, look, this is how many people watched us. This is how many people, you know, started associating, you know, our name with good stuff, and, you know, maybe your brand in conjunction. And suddenly stuff just becomes easier, right, for the tier 2 scene.
Right. Here's my current contention with this year's Overwatch, because I do think everything like goes back to the original, like how Blizzard like decided to structure this entire scene, right? But for this particular year, here's my problem with it. They went and did a Mao Zedong rather than like a George Washington. And what I mean by that is they've decided to make all outcomes equal, and by doing so, they have become like the dictator, and like basically a very small class of teams have benefited from this in a sense, and everybody else is left out in the cold. That's kind of how I would define it. So basically, like, you've basically run like a communist system with terms of Contenders, because you've basically forced the exact same structure through different regions that have completely different requirements to make them work. Whereas like the George Washington model or the United States of America, right? That's basically the key, is literally every single fucking state has their own local governance. So they make their own laws, they make their own rules that make more sense to them. but then they combine together at the top end, which should be what Overwatch League is, and that's how it should have ran, in my opinion. So, for instance, let's say this current Academy thing works great. I think it actually does work great for NA specifically. Yeah. And within the realms of what EU has become, I think it's okay. But I look at China, I look at Korea, I look at SEA, and I think to myself, well, why don't you just let them run and do whatever the fuck they want? Because you know what? I've seen China run LPL. I've seen China run Dota. They do a better job. They do a better job raising people than anybody else has. Even within this like fucked up like dystopian nightmare that is Chinese Overwatch, they somehow raise like 2 fucking great players in like Leave and Guxia, right? Like that's inarguable. So I'm just saying like just let them run it however they want. Like I don't see any point in Blizzard forcing their rules onto like regions that it doesn't make sense on. And then especially in Europe, for instance, like there are like a bunch of different ways. You didn't just have to do this way. It could have been like, all right, so LCS did try to franchise Europe by regionalizing it to countries. And I don't necessarily know if that works in Contenders, but it does make sense marketing wise. If you're trying to make a team for a specific country, it makes sense to get all the sponsors from that country then. That's kind of like why NA is generally, the US is generally considered the best team to have because it has the largest market potential.
Yeah. I think, and as I am not European myself, so maybe I'm a little bit misguided on this, but I think it's harder to market to specific countries in Europe, and just purely alone for a couple of different reasons. I mean, one, you can look at the World Cup and you can see some of the rosters that, you know, a one nation team from Europe fielded, and those rosters are not anywhere near as strong across the board as if you were mixing and matching, right? So I think you end up with weaker teams, which doesn't really help in any way. And the second reason is I think just marketing budgets. This is my understanding from talking to some Europeans that I do know in Overwatch, that marketing budgets for companies are still split by country in Europe. They're not like a region, right? So it's not like a corporations don't go, this is how much we're going to spend in Europe. They go, this is how much we're going to spend in Germany. This is how much we're going to spend in France. This is how much we're going to spend in Italy, right? So your budget gets cut down a lot. And because of that, we don't really end up with like big sponsors that are like working with teams that are like from one country. Basically, the only example is Giganti, which my understanding is Giganti is like a retailer of some sort in Finland. I don't actually know what they are, but there's a reason why they always end up with like a Finnish roster, right? Like a minimum number of Finnish players on that roster. It's because Giganti as the company wants their team to have X number of Finnish players, so it appeals to the home audience, right? And that's kind of the one example of it, basically. I mean, you know, my team, we are the British Hurricane, but we're definitely not a full British roster. You know, we have an Icelandic off tank, you know, German hit scan, and you know, I would guess we do have a new also British main tank, but now we have a Finnish main support, right, and a Swedish flex support. So we're definitely not like purely British, and just because it's hard to get all of the talent from your country, because if one player goes to another team, then suddenly like, what do? You know?
And here's my other thing I'd probably try to do is I'd probably like this bit is probably impossible given what I know of Blizzard, but like when you talk about third-party tournaments, it's not like the only third-party tournaments that exist in the world are just ones that are dedicated to a single game.
It's true.
So given the fact that viewership is low, you know what I'd do? I'd probably put this in a multi-game festival. I'm talking about like DreamHack Opens, like the old style MLGs, and I know those MLG guys love doing those, right? So make it. So I'd probably just run it that way as well.
Get it back in IEM.
Yeah, get it back.
Super cool.
Yeah, get it back in like those. Yeah, get in those lower tier tournaments, and you know what? The production's not going to be as great or whatever, but I think the viewership would literally go up just from that.
Yeah, people watch whenever it's a special event, right? You get a lot of people who watch because it's special, or maybe it's once a year or something. And I think it's really easy to like. The World Cup got crazy good viewing numbers, right? And it always does, but it's because it's a special event, right? So you let people like DreamHack, like, you know, IEM run little events, right? And if you're Blizzard, I'm not entirely sure that I understand what the downside to that is, because if you're Blizzard, you're letting somebody else pay for the production right? You're letting somebody else pay to fly the teams out there, right? But you still get a lot of the benefits of people are watching people play your game, right? And players that are eventually going to play in your main league, in theory, are getting stage experience. They're getting experience interacting with fans, and they become better personalities, and they get better storylines that then later on, once they're in Overwatch League, you get to kind of latch onto, right? And kind of take it home, so to say, as they become, they come to the majors, right? I know I did an interview with Volmo recently, and I said this. I think right now I'm definitely not in the minority. I think the majority definitely wants a lot of these third-party events to come back. I would love for them to come back and for Overwatch League teams to go play as well, because something that I personally want to see is I want to see chances for contenders teams, even if it's just like a show match of some sort, right? But a top contenders team to play an OWL team on broadcast, right? So
I actually think they should be doing that for All Stars.
Yeah, or for all stars, maybe at the World Cup stops or something, they bring contenders teams, to play, the World Cup teams, like whatever it is. I think there's a lot of room there to give contenders players more exposure by just having them play fun matches, right, against other teams, or by letting them go to these sort of special events, right?
The thing is, and that might be just the cynical Yiska talking here, but
is there any other Yiska?
There's quite some, but
there's Prophet Yiska for sure. I don't know about the others.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But I think there is an argument to be made that, for instance, if Contenders Korea teams were going to come over for a weekend event, and if Overwatch League teams, and maybe not the best Overwatch League teams, show up there, and they get bombed out, what does that mean for Overwatch League? And just the threat of that happening is probably like the illusion that Overwatch League is definitely absolutely the best league, could never be anything else, but is too valuable to keep up in order to mix and match. And we also have to say, at this point, I'm not sure how much of it is an argument of resources. Definitely probably the first thing about, this idea of a Contenders Worlds Finals, but also the matching of these different contenders regions. Because if I'm a fan, for instance, of South American contenders, I think a vast majority of people that watch these scenes love the delusion to think that they might maybe in like a lot of cases have a chance against Koreans and wouldn't absolutely banked out like it would be in the reality. So the illusion of not having these touching points probably provides enough of a
incentive.
So cynical Yiska argues that that's not desirable for Blizzard.
Well, I will pull out Dragons, Stuchu, and say this. Fucking Dragons went 0-40. That fucking illusion is dead. There's no way anybody in their right minds thinks any top contenders team could not at least get one series off of any of these other teams.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I think if anything, my argument against that would be that I think by bringing in players and maybe having OWL teams lose to contenders teams, I don't think it. I don't really think that people would take too much away from that in terms of the fact that OWL is like a sham or something. Because if a Korean contenders team, came in and like the day after London Spitfire won the grand finals, beat London Spitfire, then maybe that breaks the illusion, right? But if you play against, kind of a middle of the pack team or something, and maybe the contenders team doesn't even win, but maybe they play it close. I think all that does is make people go, wow, maybe these contenders players are really good, and it draws attention to contenders, right? Now maybe the Blizzard mentality is more that they don't want contenders to pull any attention away from OWL, right? They want contenders to kind of have its own audience and OWL to have the main bigger audience. They don't they don't want to lose figures on OWL, which makes sense because OWL is still more important, right?
Yeah.
But in that case, right, if you're worried about OWL being the main thing and you're not going to put kind of the same, obviously you're not going to put the same time, like I said, but you're not even going to put a semblance of the same time into contenders, then I have no problem with letting it just be a completely open circuit in that case, right? Just let third-party tournaments, kind of go crazy, right? And it'd be fantastic if we just had a tournament every maybe we need quite a few because there's different, teams, or, there's different regions, right? But let OGN do their thing again. I don't think there's anybody who was around in Overwatch in the Apex days who would be sad to see, something of the Apex type come back, right? That would be fantastic. And I don't think there's anybody in NA or EU who wouldn't like to have another Atlantic Showdown. Like that was so fun, and like I have such fond memories of watching the Atlantic Showdown on TV, like, with my dad. I remember that because my dad watched that with me, and my dad was so confused, but it was fantastic. And when you do stuff like that, especially with people like E-League who have TBS, right? They have this massive TV station in America, right? They give much larger audiences than even Blizzard can reach a glimpse into Overwatch, right? But the problem is they don't take it away from you permanently. They take it away from you for an hour and a half, right? While that match goes on. And then all these people who are interested go, oh my God, I have to find Overwatch. And you Google Overwatch, you Google, competitive Overwatch, and I guarantee you the first thing that pops up is the Overwatch League.
The one limiting factor in this is probably contractual, because if I'm Twitch and I paid like
that's a really good point,
90 million for the broadcasting rights to that, and ESL is like, oh yeah, by the way, we broadcast on Facebook.
Yeah.
Or
not all of them broadcast on Facebook, just the
ESPN stuff.
Yeah. You know what? You're completely right. I totally forgot about that Twitch deal. That affects ESL because I know they're doing a lot of Facebook stuff. But for someone like DreamHack,
But like, not even all of ESL events do the Facebook thing. So
I mean, there's an ESL event on right now that's on Twitch, right?
Yeah.
So there's a CounterStrike.
I am Chicago.
Maybe it's also on Facebook.
Yeah, it's just like the ESL One series is on Facebook, which is kind of like their premier brand, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
that is
like
that is
you
very true,
would
though.
have to renegotiate these deals, and then you like if Blizzard goes to
was that just for the Overwatch League, or was that for Overwatch as a
that's
as
a good
game?
question.
Because
That's
if
a very
it's
good
just for the
question.
Overwatch League, then yeah, totally. You don't. If you are Blizzard, I completely agree with not letting anybody besides you touch Overwatch League. Right? Makes sense. Go for it. But for like third-party events and stuff, I would hope that other people can stream stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it must be right, because I guess there hasn't really been like a super big event lately. But what was it? There was the tip of the hats thing where it was. I guess that was still Twitch, right?
Yeah, still Twitch. Like
Twitch, and I think with charity stuff, they aren't.
Yeah, it's charity.
Yeah.
It's for nonprofit.
Yeah, it's a bit
But
different.
If that is the case, though, if it is that it can't be broadcast anywhere besides Twitch, I don't know if I'm particularly heartbroken about that. As Elbion, as a fan, because I'm perfectly fine opening Twitch. I have it bookmarked on my Chrome, right? I go click and I'm on Twitch. Everyone uses Twitch. I'm fine with it not being on Facebook. But yeah, I guess I don't know what the wording of that deal is. That would matter a lot.
Yeah, and then also ESPN, right? They have one.
Yeah.
So you can't do E-League likely.
You know what? It must be not the Overwatch League, because I know for a fact, actually, here in America on ESPN 2, which is the second channel, they played the grand finals of the Overwatch World Cup on TV.
Okay.
So that the deal actually must be specifically the Overwatch League. Has to be broadcast on Twitch. It must be. Or maybe they allowed some sort of exception for the World Cup,
Because,
but if they're going to allow an exception for World Cup, allow it for DreamHack. I am.
Because if I'm ESL and I know exactly my metrics in esports, right? I'm not paying broadcasting fees, right?
No, I think this has to be like a StarCraft 2 deal or something, where like Blizzard is paying them to do it.
Yeah. So in that regard, I think a lot of things we simply have to say money and claim ignorance on it and just say, money.
So that's a good follow-up for me then, because I'll go ahead and say, even if somehow literally every Overwatch team and Blizzard and the Overwatch League in general like pulls together and tries to like promote Contenders, I don't think the viewership is going to be there to ever make it to ever go into the green or the black, I guess. I don't think it'll ever be there. I actually think the whole entire point of Contenders as it was built is supposed to be a money drain.
Well, unless you incorporate in those calculations the value of potential players. I suppose.
Like
even then, currently
That's
the
really
buyouts in the way, in the evaluation of players, it's also currently you're stuck at 100% of the salary that the player will have. I think first year salary. So
for the buyout.
Yeah.
It's negotiable. It's from 50% to 100%. Yeah, maximum. Yeah. But at least in the current state of Overwatch, just because of the way that like a lot of players who are in contenders are very willing to get into Overwatch League. A lot of them are pretty willing to take either dead on minimum or very close to the minimum,
dude.
Which sucks for them, admittedly, it does, but they're willing to do it just because like they want the shot,
Like, don't sign 2+1s 50K contracts. Just don't, man. And at least not without renegotiation clauses,
Yeah, I mean, get your contracts read by an attorney.
Like I feel like I guess that's another problem if you think about it, is like, because you've basically created this communist sort of regime, basically might be better to say a dictatorship, right? That specifically is benefiting the Overwatch teams. They have all the leverage.
Yeah.
They have all the leverage. So, obviously we've already disincentivized third tournament organizers. You've already disincentivized a majority of the good teams that aren't already in OWL. And listen, like, I do think some of these OWL teams are legit. Some of them are like, they would like, I know, for instance, Noah Winston, he's not going to like screw over a player just for a few extra bucks. He's not going to do it. Like, that's just not within his like philosophy as a person, as far as I can tell, based off of the fact like of actual actions he's done in the past. Right?
Yeah.
But there are going to be teams and people that will do that. Shout outs to Harsha, may he rest in peace. But basically, hey, listen, man.
How many strikes are you counting?
See, well, with the earlier explanation of this time, you mentioned the communist structure a little bit loosely, but the time before, when you explained it, I was thinking like, yeah, that might be strike 3 already. So maybe we're on 4, but I don't know if Harsha should be a strike. I don't know if
like, listen, Harsha. We all know what happened to Harsha. It's not like it didn't happen. So. Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but just like Harsha lost his job, so whatever. We'll move on. but basically, like the entire system isn't particularly good for players that are coming up, and I think I keep saying this, but it's a little after effect of like the entire construction of how they decided to create the franchise system.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else you would sell contenders to the Overwatch League teams. You go, hey, you're a franchised org, right? You have to basically sell it so it's in their favor. You have to, because they are franchised now. They are your permanent, in theory, business partners, right?
Yeah.
Maybe at some point, there has to be I'm sure there's some sort of measure of how they could remove an org if something was super drastic, right? But you have to sell it in a way that is favorable to them. And because of that, because Overwatch League is still the most important thing, realistically it is, I understand why contenders and the contender scene is built in a way that it benefits the Overwatch League teams. I understand that it kind of has to happen, really, because there isn't some sort of direct promotion relegation like the LCS had back in the day, right? So that's, in my opinion, just an even better reason that for Blizzard, in interest of making the tier 2 scene stronger, needs to not make it disincentivized, right, to run tier 3 events. Or not tier 3 events, third party events, I should say. Because you can have your Blizzard wants to have their their say in contenders, and I understand that makes perfect sense, but I also then want there to be a part of Overwatch that exists outside of it, because there's just something about kind of like a grassroots feeling of an esport, like
that can't be replicated. Yeah,
it just cannot be replicated when you can't get that same feeling from those Alienware monthly melees, right? Way back in the day, right? Where it was super scuffed stream. ZP was casting and observing and like selling out for the sponsors, but there's just something about that you just can't recreate, right? And I'm fine with that kind of part of Overwatch being there. I want that part of Overwatch to be there because not only do I think it makes it so that you can have fans who, you know, pay attention to Overwatch and feed into becoming Overwatch League fans through kind of a more like quote unquote like organic means, right? They just discover it from some caster they like or whatever who moves in to cast some little event, right? You know, maybe you're a fan of Jamerson from other games and he's casting some, you know, online little cup, right? And you go watch because he's casting and it pulls you into the Overwatch League in kind of a weird way. But it also creates a much clearer way to actually become a pro player. Because the real problem that Contenders right now is that it's billed as a path to pro, as if there is a clear path to becoming a pro player. You can play on ladder and somehow end up on a open division team and you end up in Contenders and then you just end up in Overwatch League. But the problem is the only step that you can actually make there is between open division and Contenders. Because if you win open division, you win trials, you can get into Contenders, right? But getting onto an open division team, just playing ladder isn't really enough. You still need to have some sort of scrim experience and stuff for teams to like really be like, okay, this guy's gonna be reliable in, you know, official matches and everything. And the gap from Contenders to Overwatch League is basically, can you perform and look so good that you get clips on Reddit so people notice you, and then can you perform in Overwatch League trials, which we've seen plenty of stuff lately about some of these poor Australian guys trying to play Overwatch League trials on 300 plus ping, which is insane. Of course, you're not going to look good on 300.
Listen, if some player actually looked good on 300 ping, you sign him today.
You sign him. You sign that guy. Literally, the only way you can look good on 300 ping is if you get in there and you shot call your ass off.
Like, you basically have to pull like Rafa shit. Like, you have to like literally know everything about the game.
Yeah, and the other problem is if you are, you know, not on an academy team and you're in Australia, you know, you might not be making the most money realistically. You might have to work a job on the side. You know, I mean, I am on an academy team, right? And up until just a few days ago, one of my players was a full-time doctor. You know, like that's what he did. You're not always able to completely hard dedicate yourself to Overwatch, and if you're not able to do that, you're not going to be able to hard shot call your way into an Overwatch League team either, because you're not going to understand everything about Overwatch. It takes an insane amount of man hours to do that. There's a reason that the Overwatch League team strategies are admittedly a little bit above Contenders. It's because they're able to just sit there in a room together, right? 10, 12 hours a day, whatever they want it to be like, all right, guys, we're talking Overwatch. We're playing Overwatch. We're watching Overwatch. We are talking Overwatch. And because it is an incredibly complicated game, and you just can't expect that out of players who are in regions where they're not getting these same opportunities. Not to say that, you know, these players have like a bad mentality or, you know, their brains don't work right for the game or something. I'm sure there are dozens and dozens of them who could be very good players in the Overwatch League if they were given the chance. But
shout outs to the UK beating USA, yes.
Shout outs, hey, my players, you know, I am from the US, but you know, whatever, UK beat them. I can still claim slight UK pride because I work for a British team. I definitely didn't say in an interview that the British team wasn't the favorites for the tournament, but we're gonna ignore that. But you know, how are these players supposed to show off, right? World Cup is a fantastic opportunity, admittedly, but it's once a year, you know. Let's have some IEMs and some dream hacks where players can go. They can play on stage is the big thing. First of all, you know, neutralize any sort of ping disadvantages, right? Put the pressure on the players. See who cracks under pressure, right? When you're in the Overwatch League, you're always gonna be on stage. You know, you need to know who's good on stage, and give these guys a shot. You know, realistically, because I think one of the things that has kind of interested me about the CounterStrike scene. I don't know a ton about the CounterStrike scene, but is seeing regions like Australia, which, you know, I don't necessarily traditionally associate with like producing great talent, right? But keep turning up new players. I see, you know, whatever it is, like Renegades and stuff, turning up new players, right? But it's because they have chances to go play on stage and stuff, you know, all around the world, that you can find this. And it, you know, if you are a player sitting at home and maybe you're top 500 and you go, well, I could get an open division team, I could try to become a pro player, or I could go to college and, you know, get a job, right? But you see more chances to be a pro player, to be on stage, because that is kind of the dream, really, is to play on stage, play in front of a crowd, hear people cheer your name, right? you see that there are more chances for that in your life out before you get to the Overwatch League. You see that there's kind of like a stepping stone where you can, kind of get that first hit almost, right? You can, okay, I can get on stage and I can, get recognized. People will follow me on Twitter and people will watch me stream on Twitch. And there's, there's these kind of more incremental, you can see progress. It is outside of purely a Blizzard system. And like, I just see so many benefits for that because eventually it feeds into Blizzard system, right? Eventually it does in the end, but it just creates a better, I kind of think like more well-rounded community for the game.
It's also, my problem is if I look at the entire Contenders system, right? And I think of teams that legitimately didn't lose money in Contenders, there is probably one organization. Maybe two. I don't think, but I don't think actually that Runaway is positive, even if they do sell for that money. But the only organization that is positive is KDP. Because they now sold pretty much 2 entire top level, Well,
we know they sold one. One has been leaked, right? It hasn't been confirmed, I don't think. But yeah.
Yeah, that basically also KDP are very good at negotiating, from what I understand. Yeah. So that works in the players' interest because they act as their agents and get top salaries, or not top, but very good salaries at least for their players. And I think it is possible that KDP is positive.
Yeah.
For all the other orgs, I don't think that's
119 of them basically.
So, interestingly enough, because obviously there was a lot of stuff that came out about it. In season 1 of Contenders this year, I was working with Envision eSports. Of course, the team is now folded, right? They ended up becoming Envy. Obviously, I'm not with them anymore. But Envision eSports was a non-academy team in Contenders. We did relatively well. We made top 4 in that season, and I don't know, I guess, specific numbers, but just because I know how much everyone on that team, the staff and the players were paid, right? I know how much they were paid, and I know, how many sponsors we had, and I vaguely know what was coming in, and I guarantee you that Envision eSports and the ownership was not making money off that team.
Deep in the red, right?
Yeah, no, they were very deep in the red because the revenue streams are very hard to find. It's very hard to convince sponsors, hey, sponsor my team. By the way, they play online, so you never see them in a jersey, right? And they get 5,000 viewers, right? That's very hard to do. Envision, while I was with Envision, or before I got there, they had an energy drink sponsor, and then while I was there, we got funnily enough, a jersey sponsor, and we only got that jersey sponsor once we were able to tell them, hey, we're going to land in Poland, we're going to be on camera on stage in your jerseys, and then they go, hey, how you doing? And it makes a lot more sense to them, right? Because then there's actual exposure for that brand. And that's another thing that legitimately having events that are special events that people are going to watch more, like a third-party tournament that's on stage, and putting logos on clothes and putting your players on stage in those clothes, right? Having player cams of them, the reaction cams when they, pop off and they get 4 or 5 kills, right? And oh, look, there's a logo right there, That's worth a lot in terms of just pure value for a sponsor, right? The sponsor goes, okay, well, hey, we're going to get our logo on camera. A lot of people are going to see that logo. And, afterwards when they go and people go on social media and they want to talk about the team, right? And they go to the team's page and they see, oh, hey, look, there's that logo again on the team's page, right? Because we're a sponsor. And it just starts turning into more value for a sponsor, and which makes it easier to get sponsors if you're, a Contenders team. Obviously, if you're an academy team, you probably already have sponsors from Overwatch League. But if you're not an academy team, which there's still a lot of in the Contender scene, right? Because there's only so many academy teams, because there's way more Contenders teams than Overwatch League teams. This is a huge deal for all of them. And as much as I think the academy team system is a really good way to not only develop talent, but for players to move up into the Overwatch League, most of the talent development over the history of Overwatch, I bet you, will not be out of academy teams, because Korea is only going to have so many academy teams, for one. But for two, right, especially in Europe, which is a region that has produced a ton of fantastic players as well, at the moment, we don't have any European teams really. We have Spitfire and Paris. That's it. And in this next season of Contenders, Paris doesn't have, an academy team yet because they're still like starting up. So there's a ton of talent out there that is going to be on third-party teams. And you want to, in my opinion, make it at least possible for third-party teams to exist. Do everything you can for them to exist. You don't have to make sure that they're making money because that's so hard. That's crazy hard to do. But you don't want to make it so like they're just actually out there like just bleeding money.
Yeah. Basically, I'll put it this way: if this is the actual system, in order to make it like, in order to sustain the contender scene, you'd probably need 80 OWL teams.
Yeah. Pretty much. You need an academy team. You need every single slot to be an academy team, basically.
Yeah, and that's like ludicrous. That's not going to happen. I don't care what Blizzard does, right?
See, this is where I go full communism and just say, well, then all the Overwatch League teams just, like, let's say every player gets 2K a month. That's livable. Not well in some places.
But livable if you're also providing housing.
I mean, you could do that. Depending on,
because the real problem is like legitimately because Contenders is online, where you live matters because there can just be ping differences.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in North America or in
CIS. I bet you there's gonna be a bit
in Europe. Yeah. There can be pretty significant ping differences, like very literally where you live, right? You're not always going to find in an official match, if you're a North American team, right? Somebody who's willing to go, yeah, you know what? I know you have, you have a player playing from New York, right? We'll play on East Coast, right? They go, maybe we'll play West Coast this game, And so, if you're trying to tell all your players, hey, I need you to live in LA to have the best ping possible, 2K a month is not so good. So if you're providing housing, sure, you can do 2K. But as long as the players have a livable situation, basically, then they can hard commit to Overwatch. And that's the big thing, is you just need to get it so that especially if you're on an academy team, and I know for a fact, like, Hurricane does this, right? The players have livable situations with what Hurricane gives them. So they're able to full-time play Overwatch, stream Overwatch on the side, right? Talk about Overwatch, we do VOD reviews, whatever, like, it's their job, right? But if you're an unsigned team, that doesn't happen.
Yeah. So, like, they are only as communist as they need to be in order to, get the best deal for the Overwatch League teams.
Yeah, true communism right there.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's communism it's communism in practice, not communism on paper.
Yeah.
So, that's basically the other thing that you could do if you don't have, which is, okay, this is also a thing I didn't understand. So, they are now making the prize pool more top-heavy because the players that win the season, who are most likely to get into Overwatch League, bring that money into like, I don't understand the reasoning behind any of that.
Oh, that's that's a classic esports fallacy right there.
I legitimately don't remember what the reason given was.
There was
better support players that like.
No, the reason didn't make sense.
That your GMs are just completely incompetent and literally can't open Liquipedia to check who won Contenders Europe, so they need the money to survive till someone finds them in the back alley. Like, this is, I don't know. I generally, by the way, like, ideologically, I guess, agree with rewarding
the best.
Excellence.
Yeah.
But does it make sense for a feeder league? That's my question.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and that's all Contenders is at the end of the day. It's a feeder league,
and,
especially in NA with the academy system. It's a pure like feeder league.
Yeah. Basically, as far as I can tell, that prize money won't do anything for any academy team or any OWL academy team, but it might literally save one of the worst teams.
Yeah.
But
let's
basically
see.
Basically saves the carried scrub that won Contenders but doesn't get any tryouts.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
the thing is, By the way, just real quick, they also, like, yes, they kept the prize money the same, but they cut one season. That's also less money.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So here, because I know I've done this before, but the entire prize pool for EU Contenders Season 2, which concluded a couple months ago, was $185,000. And Eagle Gaming, who won the whole season, took home just shy of $40,000, right? And then so you split that between a minimum of 6 players and one coach maybe. But I know they had a much larger roster than 6, right? Eagle Gaming had quite an expensive roster. And suddenly it doesn't look like a whole lot for what is, what a 2.5, 3 month season. And then we can go to speaking of opening Liquipedia, we can go to Liquipedia and we can go to the prize pool for one World Cup stop, right? Let's see, the Los Angeles qualifier. Every single team at the Los Angeles qualifier, I forgot about this, took home 15,000, right? And let's see for the overall, how much did like South Korea take home? South Korea, oh, that's right, they normalize it, so you take home 16 grand. If you're at BlizzCon, so you get like 30 some grand, right, for World Cup, which is also what, a couple months, from a team. It's a couple months of practice, right? I mean, maybe you could argue that World Cup you get way more exposure because you're on stage on the.
Listen, you can't live off of exposure. That doesn't feed you.
You can't live off of as a former content creator, you cannot live off of exposure.
No, you can't. Yeah.
That doesn't get the bread, so to say.
Yeah, but it's when you start looking at like 7 people for 40 grand, that's not a whole lot. That becomes really hard to live on.
Here's the one thing that makes sense. It is if you are not an academy team and you say, I take 75% of the wins.
Yeah.
And
it's like old school esports right here.
Now you're rewarding, the org that actually fostered the talent to win contenders, and they get something back. And their players are also fine because they are now in Overwatch League, most likely because, they performed well. So that is the only way it makes sense. And man, is that shady. And
it's hard to do because that's also under the assumption that like just any given team just has what it takes to grind harder than other teams to be better.
Like literally the only team I think that could do this is MVP. But they also happen to live in Korea, so I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, and it's because it's like this system is potentially livable for like one team. But the problem is
you got 8 of them in there, right?
There's 8 teams who are all going to be fighting for that exact same thing, right? Because the players have no reason to like not perform well, not try and win. Like it's totally in their best interest. So they're going to do it. And, it makes it really difficult for, that margin of error, the difference between surviving as, like financially surviving and, being able to have a place to live and to play Overwatch from, and not. If you're an unsigned team, is real slim. It's real slim. That gets really scary.
All right. So I'll explain this, I guess. Like when people talk about like the franchise league, one of the arguments I've always hated is like they all think in their fucking heads. You don't understand, man. By doing the franchise league, not only are we stabilizing the financial situation, which I think is completely true, probably, but we're also gonna be raising up and building this infrastructure for the younger players to go through. I'll go ahead and say it. I've never seen a tier 2 scene more healthy than the current open CSGO scene.
Yes.
And so they have way more teams, they have way more players salaried, and they have way more tournaments. You remember all those numbers Elbion just like threw down, like 185,000, blah blah blah. Enk, a tier 2/3 team, won a $300,000 tournament just like a month ago. In a week, and they keep going to events because they're legitimately good, at least at their level, right? So not only are they getting salary, they're getting more exposure, and they're traveling the world, and they're getting that critical experience that's going to make some of them champions one day, like international champions. I think like one of them is about to make it. But.
And I remember Thorin actually said this in the video, and it was something about the way that CounterStrike, like tier 2 teams, like really heavily put emphasis on scouting and developing players, right? Not necessarily like pure results, right? But if you can turn a player into that star fragger, you can sell him off to a team. right?
Yeah.
But right now, like I kind of have the privilege a little bit on an academy team, and like I know Promise on Mayhem Academy just did an interview where he said something very similar. We kind of have a little bit of a privilege where we have a little bit more stability, right? So we can put emphasis into working with players one-on-one really hardcore and making sure that player is ready to go to the Overwatch League one day, right? And is ready to move up. But if you're a tier 3 team, the best way for you to get any single player noticed is to just be the best team you can be. So you really have to be concerned about like broad stroke results, and it makes it puts a little bit less emphasis, in my opinion, on hardcore scouting, that like next kind of unknown player, right? Because you go, well, hey, I could gamble this unknown player, right? And maybe they turn out great, and maybe they pop off and I can sell them one day. Or you can go, well, I can take this player who I know is good, and we can potentially have a better shot at winning the season, which makes us all look better and makes us all a candidate for an expansion team next season, right?
Yeah.
Because
the greatest irony that this model so far only worked at an Overwatch League team with Boston.
Yeah,
it's insane.
The scouting talent, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The like pure like scout undeveloped talent, yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember Thorne talking about this in CounterStrike, where tier 2 teams, that's how they survive, right?
Yeah.
It's not so much because prize money is like so high, because realistically, that amount of prize money, the players get a lot of it, right? And the org only takes a little cut, and that's not enough for them to then pay the salaries for the month and a half it took to the players to practice for that event, right? It's not. So where they survive off of is selling players up to the league, and that's what has to happen in Overwatch as well. It just does. But you need to create a system where like teams don't have to be constantly worried about their short-term performance, right? Because right now, short-term performance can very literally be the difference between not being a contenders team and being a contenders team. And if you're somebody like the easy example from this past season was LNL in North America, who they did very well. And look, as an unsigned team, they did very well. And now we're seeing, their players, their staff kind of move up in the world, right? We're seeing players get signed to 2-way contracts that are, they're now connected to an OWL team. Of course, Kate went on to be the DC, GM. Like, we're seeing them move up in the world. And it's not, I don't think it would be so bold to say that it's because any specific player on that roster, everyone was like, oh my God, they're the greatest player in North America right now, but it's because they go, well, look, there has to be something kind of intrinsically good about these people, right? That they're able to perform so well. And maybe the systems that they're doing. So particularly the staff, I think very literally all of them moved up to either Overwatch League or at the very least like academy jobs now, right? And that's fantastic for them, but it's not because they took a raw kind of undeveloped talent and turned them into something great, right? It's because they made a team perform. And if you want to be sustainable, they need to be able to focus on turning talent into exceptional talent, because not only that makes the Overwatch League better as well, right?
Yeah.
If teams can focus on that, then you're going to get way more just like players who come out of nowhere and just like blow your minds,
Yeah. That's also another reason why you talked about this before, you really do need the extra lands. Because the difference between the open circuit and what the contenders is you're never going to get some bullshit guy like Nico, basically. And this is like the essential, like, if you ever saw it, it was like an eSports salon that Thorne did between like Noah Winston and Carmack. And Carmack is basically like, listen, if you literally throw the net out there and you get like 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 people, you increase the percentage chance of pulling out the lottery ticket of that one prodigy dude that's going to come out and like shock your world. And that's the guy you want. But in the contenders scene, it's already limited, and it's already become more limited because you have to actually get into a team that gets into there. And it's like a very, very small chance. Whereas in an open circuit, you get multiple chances. So,
yeah. No, I made a video about this a while ago that actually the most problematic issue is that, like, Overwatch League in itself, but also this auto promotion for some of these academy teams, and yes, it won't be staying auto promotion, which I think is good, because relegation does one thing: it applies natural pressure, almost like natural selection. So the guys with bad ideas, with bad system, they drop out and hopefully never get jobs. By the way, doesn't work that well in esports. Somehow these rats always weasel back in. But the thing is, like, that we have this talent throughput also in open systems it's much easier to find new ideas that work, right? Like with the current contender scene, you have 8 teams. There are maybe, let's say, 16 deciders in these 8 teams, like 2 per team. And if you're a player that could potentially be great, you better fit the idea of one of these 16 people that took a chance on you. 16 people decided for your entire region, right?
Yeah.
And if they aren't even good at their job, well, now you're gambling basically with your luck, or trying to, get endorsements from fellow players or whatever. By the way, smart leaders also take player feedback and say, okay, have you seen, someone that's like a good player, that's a good fit or whatever. But yeah, the general problem is that we're by these systems limiting them to too few decisions makers, and we're not even throwing them out quickly enough. So yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah.
By the way, towards the the Maoism
Okay.
thing, it's great that like Blizzard went like, well, okay, so Valve already has like the Dao De Ching like idea of leadership, that basically a leader is someone where the people in the end say, okay, we did it all ourselves. They already got that one. Let's take that other Chinese thing. Like, I would definitely take like the approach of less intervention. I like some of it, because like if we're thinking of the current situation that the Overwatch League is in, and the amount of viewers, I think it's very hard to kickstart a scene more than with strict structure. At the same time, I'm not even sure if it's really, economically efficient in the way they raised it up, but we will see this in the future. Currently, all I've heard is we're in a massive drain phase, and it's also why we're cutting down on so many of these,
Rest in peace, Reinforce, Crumbs, etc.
Yeah, the freelancers, by the way. And yeah, I mean, it is problematic in that, and we haven't even started traveling, man. Like,
yeah.
How are you going to do that then?
Yeah, like these are some fucking crazy issues. So, and like here's the thing: you don't actually have to get like this tier 2 scene to be at CS:GO level, because of the way the scheduling works. Your off season is fucking terrible. Even though I'm technically part of Overwatch, but I say you guys because you're more hardcore into it. Is your off season is fucking terrible. It's like ludicrously long, like ludicrous. So, and I assume the original intent was to let like third party organizers have their say in this part of the calendar, but like it hasn't happened, because I do think like Blizzard was too hard handed to begin with, and like they're like, fuck it, we got plenty of other games we can go to, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
go ahead.
It's like I'm not sure if it's the executives they brought in, but all these ideas they have for the off season are so like
bland,
copycatted from traditional sports, and really not that customized towards esports, right? Like these third-party tournaments that could easily work. We have these systems here. We see that people like these. It's like the equivalent of like investing like time in a movie, or a movie trilogy, like where you watch with friends over a weekend or whatever. Like that's what these weekend tournaments are. And then the leagues are more like shows you keep following. But it's like they want, they initially wanted a draft. That doesn't work now because we don't have a league. Oh well, what do we get instead? Really nothing. Okay, so what else does sports do? Oh, World Cups. Okay, let's do World Cups. What else do American sports leagues do? All Stars? Yeah, let's do All Stars. When? Directly after the final, when the players don't give a hoot? Oh yeah, let's do that then. Okay, so what else? What do the other teams sports do? Well, they sort of either have 200 days off season or 120 days. Oh, we could do 200. Okay, but the scenes with the 200, they do a lot in the off season. Yeah, but the one with 120 don't. Well, that doesn't work. Like that is ideas from two different. Yeah, we're going to do it. Like it's so all over the place at the moment that it's, I don't know. I think that might just be growing pains of the first season, and if maybe that entire thing is extended, also because now it's the season starts a little bit later, and then maybe it goes a little bit longer depending on that, and then maybe we will have less off season. One thing I can tell you is I don't think we're getting a draft anytime soon, or a combine or whatever.
My God, I hope not.
That would be
I
fucking
don't think it
terrible.
would work in Overwatch.
Yeah,
and I remember when they originally like pitched that there would be like a combine of some sort. I remember thinking like, what are you gonna have them do? Like shoot at bots or something and like record like the number of hits they get or something? You know, like you can't have them like run the 40-meter dash, right? Like they do in American football. You know, like there is no like equivalency there. So yeah, no, I do remember that. I remember being very confused by that one.
Dude, that is like off broadcast, because this is too ridiculous to tell on broadcast. But there were things happening supposedly behind the scene where people were trying to already come up with these sort of things for Blizzard before the Overwatch League started. Yeah, because if you remember, and that's actually quite hilarious, theoretically, if that ever happens, Miro can say, well, wait, I won the first one because I was the MVP at the first World Cup, and you promised me a combine slot or a draft slot.
Yeah.
Right? So he could theoretically every time come back, cash that in. But yeah, it was planned, and then it was like, oh yeah, we need a players union. And the players union is very unlikely to happen. And I'm also not sure if Blizzard wants it to happen, because most players unions actually start with huge lawsuits.
Yep.
Right? So yeah, I don't know.
So I will say this is actually just a metaphor for the entire Diablo Immortal thing, if you think about it. Because here we go, right?
Wait. That is it six strike?
I think your off season, your 120-day versus 200-day off season work was.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think I think that was 6. So this one might be 7.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go.
Because listen, there was a Twitter account, like former Blizzard developer, basically saying, you guys have like lost your minds in a sense, because you're no longer thinking like gamers. You're just thinking, oh, what's good for us? We're just stuck in our bubble. And then you announce this fucking like mobile game in the most hardcore Blizzard convention there is, and your entire audience was built off of PC games, and somehow you thought people would be excited about this for some reason. And that's actually literally what's happened to the esports thing. There's like you got a bunch of sports guys coming into an esports scene and like, listen, we're gonna do all this cool sports stuff. We're like, but we're esports, like,
yeah, yeah,
like, and any of the endemic people are like, but that's not that interesting to us.
Nope.
So, like,
it's there's no hyphen in esports, right? It's not just electronic sports.
Yeah.
It's its own thing.
Yeah.
And literally, it's every game's like its own thing too. So like,
oh yeah,
it all breaks down, and it breaks down all the way down. So I'm just saying, like, in a sense, they're consistent. In a sense, Blizzard is consistent across both their game development and their esports scene so far. Right?
You know, these things is, for me, for instance, like if I think about, okay, how do I build a fan base for Overwatch League? I want to localize and whatever. I'm not even sure. Like, okay, they have way more data, and like I always feel like I'm sounding like an ass saying this, but to me it feels like you appeal to esports fans first. They tell their local friends, and they bring them to the arena. That should be a strategy. But that could be totally wrong based on, you know, all the metrics they have. Because I felt like the Overwatch League also was reaching out in order to grow the esports audience as a whole. It's very, very possible that Overwatch as an esport has way more people that it's the first esport of, comparatively to its size, than other esports. I could totally believe that, simply because of the localization thing, simply because of throwing money into advertisements, you know, on public places that aren't strictly connected. Wasn't there like an ad on Times Square or something?
There was a whole bunch of I think there was, but I remember there was also they paid a bunch of muralists to like go around the world and like paint murals of Overwatch characters, right? To like promote the game. There's a lot there.
They should have done an Omnic Slaughter for Shanghai.
Oh God.
Is that Strike 8?
Something like probably. But no, but I think actually, trying to pull in new viewers to esports is probably a really smart idea, honestly, because I think it's pretty clear that esports is only growing, right? And why would you not try and grow it more? Because the more esports grows for just in general, as a general sentiment, the better it is for literally every developer who's involved in esports, right? It's more viewers for you.
Yeah.
And I suppose I have no idea what kind of numbers there are for like how many people Overwatch is like their first esport, right? I have absolutely no idea. But I think the localization surprised me how successful it at least appears to be, despite the fact that there was no traveling involved for season one. You saw it on Twitter and stuff, all these watch parties, that happened in cities all over, mostly America, I think it was, but I think there was a couple, happening outside. But I mean, there was just the Gilded Gala that the London Spitfire put on, right, in London. They got, I don't remember how many people they got to show up, but they got a big crowd to show up to come meet the players and, watch the show matches and just kind of have fun with it. I think there's a lot to be said for the localization aspect of it. And because it's really easy to convince somebody to be like, hey, you should check this out. If you go, hey, I just went to a party for this esports team, down, in town here, and somebody goes, seriously, there was like a party, and you're like, yeah, I was there with, a couple hundred other people, and we're watching this game together, right? And then to them, it just goes, yeah, it just sounds like a sports thing, and maybe they check it out, right? I think it's a really good marketing idea for the Overwatch League.
Also, like, I think if I analyze my purchasing behavior, right? It's like, okay, so okay, I want to buy this thing that could potentially keep me alive for $5. Let's see if I'm dead next week, and then maybe if not, but I'm about to, then I buy it for $5. But then at the same time, I go outside, like, let's put like meals for $20 in my face, just completely unnecessary, right? So it feels like, yes, if you drag people out of their, apartments, it's actually much different spending behavior that people have. I also, for instance, think I wouldn't at all be surprised if the amount of spending per viewer we have in Overwatch League was much higher than in.
I feel like it is much higher. It seems like it.
Where people buy more merch.
They buy way more merch.
Yeah, merch and stuff.
Yeah.
I think I have an 040 Shanghai jersey somewhere.
Yeah.
I would be lying if I said I don't have my fair share of Overwatch League merch. I think that is legitimately another like very serious success of the Overwatch League is the merchandising, right? The shirts, because I have a Dynasty shirt, I have a Spitfire long sleeve, I have the Overwatch League hoodie, I have Overwatch jackets, I have, I got all that stuff, and like I'm a fan of it, and I was like, oh, it's cool stuff, and I like the logos because I think the logos, generally speaking, for the Overwatch League have also been like incredible. I think they're just really good logos, and I think the merchandising is a big part of it. But getting back to the original point of the whole episode, when can we get merchandising for academy teams, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that on Blizzard or is that on the actual teams?
Both, realistically. Believe me, I would. I have a British Hurricane jersey, right? Like because I get to, but. Fuck, man, I'd love to have a British Hurricane, set of joggers, right? Like, that'd be so cool. Like, why not, right? It's for the exact same reason, I would love to have that sort of stuff. And I think if you sell that, that sort of merchandise for the contender scene, and, maybe if the academy teams come out and they start making, logos to the same kind of, quality levels of the Overwatch League logos, and you can start slapping that on hats and t-shirts and stickers and stuff, it's just, it's another way to make the tier 2 scene successful, right, and live on its own with money. It's hard, of course, to have, especially in a system with promotion and relegation, have third-party groups kind of take part in the merchandising stuff because they might drop out, but even if it's just something along the lines of like all you do is like stickers and t-shirts for those teams, right? If you say, hey, you got into contenders, right, you can do this, and even if you make if you just say, hey, submit the logo, right, and maybe you just increase like the shipping time on the product, right? Instead of shipping in, you know, a day because it's sitting in a warehouse somewhere, you say it'll ship in a week, right? Because you'll make them to order, right? Instead of per whatever. Like maybe that makes sense financially, right? And then you can share those profits with the team, and suddenly the tier 2 teams have a revenue source, you know, because the Overwatch League teams we know have, you know, there's I'm sure there's something with the Twitch deal. There's a revenue source there, you know. I'm sure there's revenue source for the Sour Patch Kids and Toyota and all this stuff. But the merch, I'm sure they get a share of, you know. Let's start creating those same kind of systems, especially for the Blizzard controlled part of the tier 2 scene, right? If for the DreamHacks and the IEMs and stuff, obviously Blizzard does not need to be worried about that. But for contenders, why not? Blizzard in theory gets to make more money off selling more shirts and stuff too, you know.
I mean,
I agree. Yeah.
Like I don't think
that's a good point.
I feel like if they were going to do that, they would have. Actually, no, they do that in the game, don't they? Right? Like team game skins.
They do it for Overwatch League teams, but not for Academy teams. And I mean, that'd be cool. That'd be super cool, especially since we know the Academy teams are going to be sticking around, because at the start of 2019, all Academy teams are auto-seeded into contenders, right? I mean, not like any of them have actually been relegated. It was just like GGEA, but that was weird, you know?
It's GGEA. The entire thing is weird.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. So, like, but they're going to get seeded back in, right? And then I believe it was 2020 as well. They were going to get seeded back in. So, like, if you make a skin for this team, it's like, you know, you're going to have them for 2 years, right? Kind of at a minimum right now. So maybe you do that, and maybe you don't even create like a different point system. Maybe you just use the Overwatch League token system, right? That's already in place. You put that into contenders broadcasts, and then you make contender skins. Even if you make them like super simple, right? I don't need the whole like recoloring of the skin. Just make like a, you know, use the like the Overwatch League like white and gray skins that they originally had, right? That you could get through the like the Overwatch League, like behind the scenes access pass, right? You got some like white and gray skins. Just make a white skin for the teams that you just slap the logo on a couple places on the skin, right? On the, you know, on the shoulder, on the back, you know, maybe on the gun, right? That's it. Done. It's going to take time, of course. It takes dev time, but it doesn't take as much time as the whole system that they did for the Overwatch League, right? But then suddenly there's just another revenue stream and another reason for people to watch contenders broadcasts, and hopefully another incentive for people to kind of support you know, a contenders team as well, right? It's never going to be to the same level of the Overwatch League, right? Because you know, in America we have a baseball system that feels kind of similar to the Overwatch League, where it's like the majors, right, where everyone watches the majors, and some of the hardcore fans kind of watch the minors. But the minors the minor league teams are really often connected to, you know, major league teams. They're kind of a feed league, so to say. It works in similar-ish ways, and you can still get merchandise for that stuff. It's definitely less common for people to own, you know, way less common, don't get me wrong, but it happens, and it's a revenue stream, right? And just that revenue stream, I think, is really important for tier 2 teams right now that aren't Academy teams especially. But, you know, Overwatch League teams are only more willing to have an Academy team if it's going to sustain itself, if it's not a pure money drain, right? Yeah. Even if it's just neutral, then they go, why not? It's neutral, but we get to, you know, we literally lose no money on this team. You could maybe, right? Or maybe we lose, you know, a few $1,000s a year, but we have a direct system of testing players in official matches, right? Of scouting talent, of seeing how workable they are in a team environment under our own staff. And if we want that player, we just kick them up.
Yep.
As a side note, I'm still waiting for the Jonak MVP skin that they should have named. I actually straight up said they should rename Zenyatta to Jonak.
Oh,
right? But I'm sure that would actually ruin the league, wouldn't it? Everybody already thinks they're fucking Jonak.
I would be super down for Blizzard to do what Riot does, right? Where they make the World Championship skins. That would be super cool. I think,
yes,
like a special edition of the, you know, London Spitfire skins, right? I think that would be awesome. You don't even have to change the London Spitfire skin all that much, right? And like, you don't have to do what Riot does, where they like, you know, put like the hair and stuff of the person, right? You could literally just like change a couple things on the skin to like maybe have like a little gold thing on it, right? You know, like a gold Overwatch logo, or you know, the Overwatch League logo, like how the Spitfire did with the, you know, the stars, you know, like the one star to represent the one championship. You put that on the skin, like that's awesome, and then more people will buy the skin because of it, right?
Yeah, I think it's all the rage.
While we're at it, you know.
it's a great acknowledgement of the esports scene to incorporate it. Valve does it as well with these sprays on walls and stuff.
Did they start doing? Somebody started doing rings, didn't they?
Call of Duty.
Was it Call of Duty? I still think rings are like for esports. They're like, I don't know. Even for traditional sports, I think they're super unnecessary. But they're just like, it's just cool though. It's just cool. Just
you Americans are so tacky.
Dude, I don't know why I think it's cool, but like it's just something about it. It's honestly because there's like a culture built around them where it's like a trash talk thing, right? Where like some maybe some like super like successful quarterback, like the young player is like getting uppity and he's like, how many rings do you have, right? And he's like, remember your place kind of deal, right? Like your place in history. It's a good reminder of the history that has happened, like the skins are, right? The skins are a super simple way to it's a remembrance of that legacy. The player gets to see it, and also the upside is it's a revenue stream.
Yeah, like I personally prefer like pins via like
Brood
War style, where you just literally put it on your fucking shirt. You don't even have to trash talk. You just like literally point it, and then it's like, oh shit, this guy's the real deal, right?
Done. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's but whatever it is, right? Obviously it's a digital game, so digital symbol of it is appropriate. But I like the physical symbols as well.
You know what I would, if I was the person in control of it, I would have, like I said, made a Jonak skin because he did win the fucking MVP, right? Like
for World Cup, it's not the Overwatch League.
No, I think he basically should have won it for Overwatch League too.
Oh, actually, wait, who was the Overwatch League MVP?
No, it was Jonak.
Oh yeah.
Like
the Finals MVP was Prophet, right? I should know this.
Yeah, probably Prophet because he had the biggest moment.
I should know this, you would think, but
no, it was Prophet. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's arguments for like Fury and stuff, but whatever. But like, what I would have done is I would have given a signature spray to Gesture, and it would have said, "What up now, Fisher?" That's what I would have done.
Oh, that would have been good, actually.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, nobody's into the WWE stuff like I am.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So Overwatch League is poor for it. All right, I think that about covers it for the bunch of the contenders issues, as far as I can tell. So, all right, but we do have like a coach from British Hurricane, right? So I just want you to tell me real quick if there's any upcoming players I should be looking out for in the rising contender scene or Overwatch World Cup. Like I know apparently like Gushia and Leave are like fucking ridiculous. Apparently. Yeah.
Well, actually. A better point to bring up of a more kind of big picture issue, which is telling, I think, is that I know for a fact that a lot of players feel this way, and I feel this way. That World Cup is a better way to get noticed than Contenders.
I told you.
You can play in Contenders, for a whole year. You can be grinding your ass off for a whole year, and you can get less publicity and potentially, less noticed by Overwatch League teams than a player who plays in the World Cup, right? For 2 little LAN events, right? I mean, not little LAN, but 2 events, right?
Yeah.
2, like 3-day events, right? You can get less recognition for that. A lot of the time, that player on the World Cup has also been playing in Contenders and stuff like that, right? But if that player gets on stage and they perform exceptionally well, it's very obvious to see the kind of excitement that gets built around this player. And the easy example is my former player, Fusions. He is no longer with the Hurricane because, of course, he's on a 2-way contract with Boston Uprising. And he went to the World Cup and he popped off. He legitimately played super well. He and Kib had some insane stun slam combos on stage against USA, against South Korea, right? These incredibly hyped moments that so many people are going to remember for a long time to come. And there's like these immediate demands on Reddit and social media. People are like, sign this man, sign this man, sign this man. Of course, I knew he was at that time already. But then when Boston comes out and says, hey, we signed him, everyone goes nuts and they go, oh my God, like Huck is a genius and all this stuff. And don't get me wrong, they did a good job noticing the talent that Fusions has. I legitimately believe that. But the World Cup just is such a way that like if Fusions hadn't like tried out for Boston, they would still see that performance and notice it, right? Because I guarantee you more people from Overwatch League, more staff members and stuff were watching the World Cup, especially with the World Cup viewer, but even if it wasn't there, more than we're watching the World Cup than we're watching, regular season Contenders matches. No, they weren't watching regular season EU Contenders matches to see what Fusions was doing. He's the same player. He's very good. I mean, he's made improvements, of course, but he's a good player, right? And he gets noticed from World Cup, not so much from Contenders, which is unfortunate. He's literally a Contenders champion,
Yeah, I mean, the one also quality that one has to say that is going for people that do well at the World Cup is they are at BlizzCon, and most GMs are at BlizzCon.
That's true.
So
That's
you can talk to the player and, get sort of a feeling for what kind of a person he is. Because, like, if we learned anything from Overwatch League Season 1, chemistry within the team, yes, you can have fallouts, but it should somehow work, right? And it should be workable. So that is definitely a big thing, which would once again also speak for Contenders Worlds Finals, where all the GMs then line up and already talk to the players.
That would be very cool as well. So, and it'd be very cool, in my opinion. You don't have to spend any extra money on a stage or anything. Just have Contenders Worlds at the Blizzard Arena in Los Angeles, right? Where you normally have the Overwatch League stuff. The Overwatch League GMs would just go to the office that they normally go to, right? But it's also very cool for the players to get to play on the Overwatch League stage and everything. But you're not spending money on flying your broadcast talent and the broadcast team out, right? You're not trying to set up a stage somewhere. You're just at home, right? All you have to really do is fly people into LA and put them up in a hotel, right? Obviously that costs money. That does cost money.
Yes.
But it's a lot less than, trying to fly them, around the world or something, right? It's
all the equipment and whatever. Like
it's just less things you have to move, basically. But it would still be fantastic for player exposure, right? To answer your original question, though, who should you be looking out for? I mean, I won't even touch Korea because there's plenty of people in Korean Contenders.
Listen, you can pull out 40 players from Korea and 40 more would rise up instantly.
They just come out of nowhere. I don't know where they come from, but they keep coming, man. And it's sad because when I originally got into working with Overwatch teams, I thought in my head oh great, now I'm going to be making more money doing Overwatch stuff. I can dedicate more time to watching Overwatch stuff. And suddenly you realize very fast that you actually lose time from watching other regions. Because you have to focus on your region so much more, right? So I'm actually fairly out of touch with Korea right now. I know a little bit still, but I'm fairly out of touch, and I'm definitely out of touch with China and Australia and stuff like that. But in Europe, there's a lot of talent that did get it passed over, in my opinion. I think one of the obviously I'll mention my players because of course I love my players. All of my players I think should have gotten in because I can see all their good qualities, right? I can see what they could bring to the right team. But outside of my players, I think a notable name that got passed up, somebody who has been around for forever and has a really good mind for the game, is Davin for Giganti.
Yes.
He's pretty much one of the only players from Giganti who didn't go up or is rumored to or whatever.
He basically needed another World Cup performance to get back in.
And unfortunately Finland didn't have the greatest World Cup, right? But obviously a lot of Overwatch League stuff has been happening before the World Cup anyways. Like a lot of the tryouts and stuff that went on this season. And a lot of the signings, because there's been a million leaks about the signings well before the World Cup, right?
Shout out to the spreadsheet.
But yeah, so Davin is one that immediately sticks out in my head, but there's, especially in Europe, because I legitimately feel like Europe is the region besides Korea that also produces fantastic main tanks in particular. I think there's a lot of main tanks that people are still sleeping on that could be are very good, especially right now in a world where you can't actually just be a Winston one trick. You actually have to play other main tanks, because they're just certain
that shade on Miro.
That shade on Miro, man. There are just certain points in the game right now that Reinhardt based compositions are super dominant, right? And you can play other stuff into it, but it's the margins for error for your execution is so tight that there's a lot of European Reinhardt players who are just basically better than the other Reinhardt players from other regions. Play pretty plain and simple, obviously we just it was just announced, well, I guess at the time of filming yesterday, 2 days ago, something like that, that we signed Numlocks, of course former Valiant player. And one of the things that stuck out to us from Numlocks was we watched his Reinhardt, we're oh shit, yeah, nope, he really does know what he's doing on Reinhardt, and there are other players in EU that do the same. But for other kind of hidden hidden gems in EU. It's funny because the talent development in EU is going to slow down, especially in Finland, because of Saita leaving. Because Saita has such a reputation for like just taking in Finnish players on Giganti and just like turning them into crazy talents. And Davin's like the only one who's still like, hey guys, kind of suck. It's horrible for him. He deserves it. He's a really good player. I'm trying to think of like another name. I don't know why I can never think of names on the spot when I'm asked. I never can. Let's see.
So,
who else?
I mean, some people. It's hard to come up with names that aren't sort of leaked on some.
Yeah,
teams,
that's very true.
Well,
what do you think about the Angry Titans guys, like Wolzish, Ludi?
The Angry Titans guys are all across the board, especially in when they were playing their own style last season. It is hard to argue against how well they did, right? You know, making Contenders finals is, as much as nobody really watched it, it's worth something, right? I think in particular the one that stuck out to me from there was Lulzish, again, main tank, right? But Lulzish was the one that really did stick out in my head. I think there's actually there's a surprising amount of German off tanks that are like really good, like Nex and Mete, who are like kind of slept on a little bit. I think they're kind of a little bit slept on. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, realistically, obviously, I feel like again, going back to Hurricane, I feel like we ended up with a lot of good players because, you know, try and take the good players for myself, you know. But Samsung, the Samsung team that just got announced has a spot in Contenders. They have a lot of good players in that one. Malzasa in particular, another main tank, crazy, is also really good. I know he's like really comm heavy. He's a skilled player as well. KSP is on that roster, and he's one that's like kind of a question mark for me. I've seen him pop off sometimes, but you kind of have to wonder why he never played for World Cup, you know, when he is this kind of like hit scan prodigy. Yeah, and then again, I didn't really follow NA too closely last season, so I'm not sure for NA. Korea, again, just pick somebody. They'll probably be all right.
That's the Korean way.
That's the Korean way, as long as you beat them into shape. And then obviously China, you know, everyone knows, leaving Gushui now.
I mean, Eileen, Shy, for instance, are in there.
But there's plenty of talent all over the world. Is basically the point of this, right? There is absolutely plenty of talent that is entirely good enough to be in the Overwatch League. And it is a little bit of a shame that the Overwatch League isn't more teams, but I don't know. You have to have a limit on it, right? So it'll be really interesting, and you know, especially in a couple of years, when kind of maybe the old guard starts really exiting the Overwatch League kind of en masse. You know,
I think the old guard's gonna disappear in 1 year.
You think season 3?
Yeah, because Korea's accelerating.
Well, Korea's accelerating because they still have lands is a big one.
Like,
they play on stage for every single match in Contenders, which that's hard to ignore for sure. That kind of experience.
Like I know everybody was thinking in their heads, like once you get all the best players into LA, like, oh, this will surely be the Citadel of Overwatch League of Overwatch or whatever. And you know what? It kind of is, but for the rising players, I'll go ahead and say I still think if I had unlimited money and I was running a Contenders team, I'd actually just have them fly out to Korea instead and fight it out there.
You have them play through Korea. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. That would make a ton of sense. And you know, if you were, I mean, for housing costs, I've never lived in Korea or anything, but people always talk about it as if Korea is quite cheap. I've heard a few people who have lived in Korea for esports stuff say that living in Korea is relatively cheap.
It's just the real estate's like big, but everything else is cheaper. Yeah.
So how do you maybe you house people in Korea and play in Korean Contenders? Although now, of course, there's region locking, so you can't actually do that anymore. Haha.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about the region locking thing.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's mostly a detriment to Korean players, basically.
And Europeans as well.
Yeah, I think Europeans are kind of screwed. Like, I feel like
Europeans can't go. Not as many Europeans can go to NA anymore. Koreans can't go to like China or to the Pacific or NA. Yeah. So but particularly actually, yeah, Europe, it really does screw over. NA is basically the only region that, like, if you're a North American player, you're like, yeah, well, because you have double the teams now, of
Yeah.
every other region. So
We're
there's still
we're
spots
actually
here.
literally testing Noah Winston's theory. If you ever heard of it, where he's like, listen, I can take any any like pretty good talent, and if I force them into this like bubble of infrastructure and coaching and whatever, they'll be as good as those people stuck in the wild. People stuck with the wild. None of that. We're about to see that, and I'll go ahead and say I think Europe and Korea is going to come out trumps. It's going to come out aces in this scenario.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. One final thing I'll say is, I think I've always said this: Overwatch World Cup is a better contenders than contenders, and it's proven true again. All right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think it covers it. You guys have anything else you want to say?
Nope, that's about it.
Nope.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
All right. Final word.
Thanks. Yeah.
Don't go down the road of communism. Go down the road of democracy. Think about it, Blizzard.